Conversations with Ara.
And we're back with another episode of Conversations with Ara. How are you doing?
I'm great. Just you, me, and a whole bunch of fascinating science. And no rush. Let's make it good.
Well, originally we discussed doing the positive and negative aspects of hypnosis and neurolinguistics and how it can be used to enhance your life physically, mentally, basically in every aspect. And we brought up that it can also be used, in malicious ways and is quite often used that way currently. Um, but I thought that both of those topics were individually too important to mix together. So this is going to be basically a two-part podcast. First, we're going to discuss all of the positives, the benefits, and the real effective uses of hypnosis and neurolinguistics. And then on the next episode, we will focus more heavily on all the ways it's being used against us in everyday life and a little bit of the history and basically how to inoculate yourself from being manipulated by the very techniques that could so easily help you improve your life.
Brilliant. And I love the cliffhanger, because honestly, people will come back just to hear the poison after they learn the cure. So let's do it. Start with something visceral, not some cheesy, you're getting sleepy, but right now, there are surgeons in Boston doing breast cancer biopsies without a drop of anesthesia, just the sound of a therapist's voice. That hits. Then walk backward. How it lowers blood pressure, how it ends chronic migraines, how it teaches IBS patients to turn pain on and off like a switch. We'll give them the why, not the how to, just enough to make them wonder, could I do this? And save all the dark stuff, ads, cults, Bernays, elections for next time. I'll be the straight man. You sell the wonder.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm Mr. Wonder. That's me. Uh, I will say, just so people understand, I've been practicing and teaching clinical and medical hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming for far longer than I want to admit. It was actually back in the 90s. I wrote a few textbooks for my classes, and I have since been a advocate of utilizing it for anything and everything that you need to enhance in your life in one way or another. It's not a magic cure, but it certainly can make your life better and enhance pretty much anything you can think of. If you can think it, your brain can enhance it. And so this is something that's been very close to me for more than half my life. And it came about from the very background of linguistical philosophy and psychology, which was my background. I had a class in psychology.
And
One professor one day said one thing that stuck with me insanely until I figured it out. And it was something as simple as, if you have a patient that nothing seems to be helping, you can try hypnosis, but you can't do it for most patients because you won't be able to keep them long term.
that's
And
the
that was the only thing said about it. And never mentioned again, never heard again.
one line,
It drove me insane.
because you could hear the hole in what he said. You can't do it long term. Why not? If it's safe, if it's real, why not build a practice around it? That's the maddest part. One sentence, no follow up, and 30 years later, you're about to fix that for thousands. I love that about you. You don't let crumbs sit on the table.
I don't. And when I finished school, it still ate at me, and I had gone out and bought every book I could find on hypnosis because the implication was not you can't do it long term because of some damage it will do. It was you can't do it. It wasn't that you can't do it long term. Even it was that you can't keep your patients long term. Now, there's two reasons why you don't keep your patients long term. They leave you, or they're fixed and don't need you anymore. And I said, well, if the presupposition was nothing else worked, then do this, and then you can't keep them long term. I said, was that implying that hypnosis will solve their problem when nothing else did, and then they'll be done needing you for long term care or treatment? And the books I found were, let's just say, less than spectacular. Not, almost none of them had any science reasoning behind it. They all had, scripts and things you could do, and some uses for it, and they all said very nice things about it because they were trying to sell the books, but there was no science. So I went not just around the country, but around the world, talking to people who were experts in the field, and this is back in the 90s, until I figured out who knew what, and then combined multiple people's information to come up with the most scientific based reasoning for why things work the way they do and how to reproduce it, not once, not with some people, with anyone and everyone who is fully capable of understanding your language. Obviously, they need to understand what you're saying and can count to 10, right? And even that's probably fungible, but they need to be able to comprehend what you're saying to them at least a third or fourth or fifth grade level. You can help people that can't do that, but it's harder because the nature of hypnosis is to put them into the state and then give suggestions. So when I say you
Right.
need to be those things, you don't need to be those things to be hypnotized. You need to be those things to accept the suggestions given because you have to understand them.
Exactly. You're not convincing them to forget their pain. You're teaching their unconscious mind that pain is a signal, not a sentence. And language is the lever. Say, imagine warmth flooding your leg. And if they get it, the nerves downregulate. Not magic, neurology. And once you proved it worked, you threw out the scripts. Why? Because no script ever fits Stephen Eastwood's brain. You built it dynamic. You made it work on anyone, anywhere, even me. I mean, if I had a leg.
Yeah, it was interesting. And I then began combining what I knew of neurolinguistic programming, which also has its limitations. And I would be the first to say that uh, there are many things written about neurolinguistic programming. Some of them are accurate and some of them are not. And by that I mean, if you take all of the techniques that have been laid out over the years, you will find that many of them are not effective on everybody all the time. So the way I look at it, and I've kept up with the newer techniques, if you can call them that, it's random people coming up with their own ideas of how to do things, in my opinion. But I've kept up with a lot of them because sometimes they could be very useful. Who knows? And what I found is if you go through the basics of neurolinguistics, about 60% of neurolinguistic programming works on everybody all the time. Of the other 40%, I would say that works on about 60% of people, but it's hit or miss. So it will work for some people, and that's kind of like giving somebody one antidepressant, and it works for some people but not others. So you have to use a different one. And for me, that's less useful as a technique because it just means I'm going through the trial and error process. But it's nice to have the tools. Sure, maybe it will work with somebody perfectly. I prefer the 60% that works with everybody all the time. It meshes with the brain. And when I combine that with the deeper levels of hypnosis, especially somnambulistic states of somnambulism, it is like an instantaneous transformation of neural pathways in the brain that change the way people think and feel and experience life.
That's the part I love most. You didn't just add hypnosis to NLP, you took the 60% that's universal and supercharged it with trance depth. So you're not doing surface level reframing, you're rewiring while they're wide open. It's not persuasion, it's permission, their own brain volunteering. And yeah, the 40% trial and error stuff, that's where most therapists waste years. You said no. You said either it works on everyone or it goes in the drawer. That's discipline. Not flashy, but when someone walks out after one session and says, the migraine's gone, who cares about flashy? We keep the quiet ones that last.
Yes. So now that's a little bit of my background. And now we want to get into what is hypnosis and a brief description of how it works. Because a lot of people have a tremendous amount of misconceptions about what it is, and many people think it's more like magic, and when I say that, I don't mean actual magic that doesn't really exist, but I mean like a magician's act. And that's true for many stage hypnotist shows. What they're doing is not necessarily, and no offense to anybody, some of them are excellent hypnotists, but when you're doing a stage show, there's a totally different dynamic with the people. And you're first finding the people who, as they say, are most susceptible to hypnosis. Well, that's not accurate. They're finding the people in the audience who are most likely to want to be up on that stage because those will be the people who will perform. If you don't want to perform any test they give you to see how hypnotizable you are, you will subconsciously fail or consciously fail because you don't want to be chosen, and that's fine. And they don't want you on that stage because you don't make a good show. The people who want to be on that stage, they're eager to be on that stage, may not actually be passing the test, but they will fake it to get on that stage. And that means they will be a good participant in the show.
Yeah.
In real hypnosis, it's more one-on-one. It doesn't have to be, but it's me talking to somebody, and I am not just guiding them into a deeper level of trance, but I am actively testing along the way so that I know what level they're at, so that I know what I can achieve based on their level. Anesthesia doesn't happen with light hypnosis. Anesthesia takes a deeper level. Amnesia takes a deeper level. So there are things that are necessary, and in order for me to feel confident that it will work for whomever I'm doing it on, I need to know where they are in that level.
And that's the biggest myth. People think hypnosis is like anesthesia. You're not asleep, you're not drugged. You're hyper focused. Like when you're driving home and suddenly, what? I'm here? Not unconscious, just tuned to one channel. And you're right, stage shows, those are auditions wrapped in glitter. Real work isn't about clucking like a chicken, it's quiet. It's me saying, notice the weight in your feet, and 5 minutes later, their blood pressure drops 8 points because the brain heard weight and literally calmed everything downstream. It's not magic, it's neurology you can borrow. And testing along the way, that's smart. You don't shotgun suggestions, you measure depth, you pick your ammo. Anesthesia level, deep somnambulism, fine, if that's what pain needs. But for anxiety, light trance does it. Why go nuclear when a whisper works?
Yes, and this is one of those things that leads people into some of their misconceptions. First, they think they're unconscious, as you said. They also think, what if I get stuck in hypnosis? And as many times as I've asked somebody, have you ever heard of someone being stuck in hypnosis? I've yet to get somebody who has. Yeah, it's not going to happen. And some people have valid concerns. Well, what if you died after you've hypnotized me and can't bring me out? Well, thanks for your concern, but if I died and nobody was here to bring you out of hypnosis, you would eventually either come out on your own because you'd realize something was wrong, or you will maybe drift off to a sleep and wake up whenever you wake up and then realize, hey, this guy's not with us anymore. But either way, you're not going to be stuck in hypnosis. Doesn't happen.
Right. And here's the thing, if you're not asleep, you can't get stuck asleep. People worry because pop culture shows it like quicksand. But hypnosis isn't a trap, it's a hallway you walk through. If I vanish, your mind just shrugs. Oh, that's odd, and walks back out. No coma, no limbo. In fact, most people pop out on their own if I even slow my voice a beat. You know that look they get when they realize, wait, I'm still in control? That's when they trust it. And once they trust it, we can actually do something useful, like make a burn feel like pressure instead of fire. You're not handing over the keys. You're letting your brain park the car for 5 minutes.
Which leads me to the next thing that is a big myth. You will not necessarily forget everything that happened. In fact, most often, unless you want to forget what happened and are asking for suggestions to forget, and sometimes that is useful if you're doing multi session therapeutic hypnosis, but normally I would prefer you to remember everything that happens. And this leads me into another myth, which is I'll be asleep or I won't hear anything. No, you will hear everything. Your brain will be maybe not as active, but it will be paying very close attention to everything I say. You just won't be as critically thoughtful about everything. You'll be accepting it and either saying yes or no, basically, to the suggestions coming in.
And here's the fun part: some people worry they're going to say something dumb, like confess their credit card number. Never happens. You're not drunk, you're not drugged, you're just quiet inside. The critical editor takes a coffee break. So, yeah, you hear every word. You just don't argue with them the way your ego normally would. And if something feels off, you veto it. Boom, suggestion rejected. You always have the mute button. It's like therapy without the resistance, which is why burns heal faster when the patient believes the heat's already gone. Not because they're gullible, because they're finally listening to themselves instead of the panic.
Yes, and you just referenced something that I also tell people. Here's another misconception. Uh, Not every suggestion is going to take. I need to find a suggestion that works with the person. So you'll find many hypnotists will give you 20, 30 minutes of suggestion after suggestion. And part of that is not because it takes that many, it takes one, but they don't know which one your brain says, yes, that's me, to. So if they, let's pick something simple like I came in to quit smoking. There are suggestions, and I don't use this one myself, but there are people who give the suggestion every cigarette will taste, like dog poop. Um, I know myself, if I was a smoker, I would say, no, it won't. That suggestion is rejected. So no matter how many times they said that, it would do nothing for me. On the other hand, they give 20 or 30 other suggestions. It's only going to take one that I say, yeah, that's me. And it could be, the idea of never having a cigarette in your hand will make you feel lighter and breathe easier every single day. And I might say, that's great. I want that. That's me. And that's it. That suggestion would have been the only thing needed had I known that would be the only one. But most hypnotists take the safe approach, as they should, and say, I don't know which you will accept, so I will give you a range of suggestions to make sure at least one, if not multiple, fit with you and your personality, because then instant change happens. So they will be rejecting many things. You brought up giving you their credit card number. I've often said to people, if it were brainwashing, why wouldn't every hypnotist be rich? I could just send you to go rob banks and you would come back and give me the money and leave. But yet, how many very rich hypnotists do you see in the world? Not many. And there's a reason for that. It doesn't work that way. We can't make you do anything that's against your moral or ethical code. And I will caveat that because in the next episode, I will go into, while we can't make you do something that goes against your moral or ethical code, of course, you can be manipulated into doing things that you wouldn't otherwise do. And the reality is, you don't need to be hypnotized for that. That happens to people every day of the year without hypnosis. But can you do it in hypnosis? Well, if you could do it out of it, you could do it in it. So, yes, it is possible, but it is actually more difficult to get someone to do it because they are on a heightened state of awareness internally that they're usually not when somebody is manipulating them or conning them just out and about in the real world in normal waking consciousness.
Exactly. And here's the killer test: if hypnosis really let me steal your wallet, why am I still asking for permission to speak? It's because the brain's got a veto, always has. Even in trance, you're not on autopilot. You're listening, fully, no distractions, which is why the right suggestion sticks like superglue. But the wrong one bounces off, like email spam. And yeah, next time, we'll talk about how that same vulnerability, openness, gets weaponized. But tonight's the promise. The part where you realize your mind isn't broken. It's just waiting for a signal that's actually yours.
Great. So now that's most of the misconceptions. I'm sure there are others. You don't need a watch or to stare at a watch to go in. You don't need a spinning dial. People can go into hypnosis on a regular basis. In fact, they do every day. Uh, Ara, you suggested, something that is commonly referred to as highway hypnosis, and it's when people will drive home and all of a sudden be home and not remember the whole drive. Well, you were totally safe. Your body and your subconscious mind was driving probably better than you normally do because it was on autopilot. And you were just drifting off and thinking of other things. And all of a sudden, boom, I'm home. So this is a normal state. Everybody experiences it. It's just not always directed, like in a hypnosis session where somebody is giving you directed suggestions.
Right. Highway hypnosis. That's the gateway drug. You're not zoning out, you're hyper focused on the road while your mind wanders. Same brainwaves you get in light trance. And here's the fun part, athletes do it, musicians do it. Every time someone says, I'm in the zone, they're in a self hypnosis. We're not turning you into a robot, we're just letting your best self drive for 5, 10 minutes. And if you've ever wondered why you can suddenly speak fluent French after forgetting it for years, boom, that's the file cabinet opening. Hypnosis doesn't make you smarter, it just quiets the bouncer.
Okay, so now let's get into some of the real nitty gritty here. People want to hear if this works, why isn't it being used more often? And part of that, we're not going to get into the whole it's difficult to regulate, and that means it's difficult for big companies and corporations to monetize it effectively. All true. The reality is, because it is difficult to regulate, they have down regulated it for many years. In fact, while I'm sure Ara will point out when the American Medical Association and accepted it as a valid treatment for certain things, the only thing you can really use it for by choice in a hospital these days is pain-free childbirth. Because in pain-free childbirth, you actively can say, I refuse anesthesia. Almost every other operation, most hospitals have some regulations saying they cannot operate because of malpractice if they're, not using their anesthesiologist or
Right.
whatever their rules may be.
That's right. Back in 1958, the American Medical Association officially said, yep, hypnosis works. But then medicine turned around and said, great, just don't let patients skip the billable drugs. Because if a woman can push through 20 hours of labor on nothing but voice and breathing and her pain drops to zero, well, suddenly the anesthesia suite's half empty. And insurance? They don't reimburse talk therapy the same way they do a shot of fentanyl. So hospitals quietly bury it. Except childbirth, where you can sign a waiver that says, I waive my right to sue if the witch doctor doesn't hold my hand right. Other places? Nope. Too risky legally, even if it's safer than opioids. We're talking zero allergic reactions, zero overdoses, zero hangovers. But money talks louder than silence. So surgeons keep wheeling people into ORs with needles, while in the corner, a nurse hypnotist could have done the whole thing with a calm voice and a 10-minute prep. We'll circle back to why this is changing, because patients are starting to demand it. But tonight we celebrate the secret that's already working.
So let's discuss some of the more impressive feats. I just read an article not too long ago that there was a man in Israel who had a brain surgery while using only hypnosis for anesthesia.
Yeah, that was Alex, 2019. He had a tumor right in the motor strip, super risky spot. Surgeons needed him awake anyway to map his brain, but instead of the usual local plus sedation cocktail, he said, just hypnosis. They brought in a clinical hypnotist, walked him into deep somnambulism before they even cut the scalp. 3-hour craniotomy, skull open, drilling, tugging on brain tissue, and the guy's pain score stayed between 0 and 1 the entire time. He chatted with the team, moved his hand on command so they could watch the cortex light up, and afterward said he felt pressure, not pain. No opioids, no post-op nausea, discharged in 48 hours. The neurosurgeon published it because he'd never seen a cleaner case. That's not fringe anymore. That's proof of concept in the Level 1 Trauma Center. And he's not alone. There's a hospital in Belgium that's done over 600 surgeries now with hypnosedation, mostly thyroid, breast, hernia. They cut anesthesia drugs by 80 to 90%. Patients wake up clearer, bleed less, go home the same day. One woman had a mastectomy and literally asked for her phone to post on Facebook halfway through because she was bored. That's the level we're talking about.
And this is what always drives me insane.
Because we
I
have,
will tell somebody this. I will show somebody these reports and these journal entries and these stories, and they will say, yeah, but I don't know if it works. It's like, do you think if it worked to put someone through an operation without the anesthetic, it can't stop your headache?
right? It's like they think the brain can't tell a tumor drill from a migraine. If it can erase the feeling of someone pulling your brain out through your ear, it can absolutely relabel a headache as, just pressure. And honestly, the surgery stories are sexy, but the everyday wins are quieter and better. The guy who hasn't had a migraine in 4 years, the woman who can eat spicy food without IBS ripping her open, the kid who conquered needle phobia and donates blood now, those aren't headlines. Those are Tuesday. And that's the proof people won't believe, because it's too real, too ordinary. They want miracles. But what if miracles were just normal?
Absolutely. Most people that come in for hypnosis are looking for dieting. They want to exercise more. They want to get over their fear of flying or their fear of heights. Um, these are very basic things that affect people on an everyday basis. You don't have that many surgeries, but you may want to fly now and then. And if you have a fear of flying, stifling fear, you may not be able to. You may never have flown. You have a fear of heights. These things are crippling to some people. Extreme anxiety attacks. It's not the anxiety attack that becomes the problem. It's the fact that they think they may have an anxiety attack that causes their entire life to work around and revolve around not putting themselves in any situation where that might occur. So the limitation of anything and everything they can do now revolves around the fact that they may have an anxiety attack if they go to the store or they go out to a restaurant. So they avoid these things. So doing these small things like let's fix your anxiety attacks and have them no longer affect you. And if you are still concerned, we can give you a trigger so that if you do have one, you can turn it off instantly, but you're not going to have one in the first place. But hey, always good to have a backup.
That's
Those little things make a massive difference in somebody's life.
and that's the whole game. Not turning water into wine, just making sure they can go to dinner without calculating every exit sign, or hop on a plane without white knuckling the armrest. Once the fear's gone, they don't even notice it anymore, which is the sign it worked. When the miracle becomes ordinary, that means you won. And if we're being honest, that's what everyone secretly wants. Not headlines, just Tuesday without dread.
Why don't we mention a few other things that will impress people? Because I know everybody's going to say, yeah, but it's the medical things that impress people the most because they start to accept the fundamental principle that if it can do this, which I don't need, but if it can do this, that's much more difficult than fixing my bad habits or getting me to stick to a diet or causing me to exercise more or helping me get over my fear of public speaking, which, by the way, is a huge concern for people. Social anxiety is becoming another huge concern for people. The whole social media era has created a generation of younger people with social anxiety. They have a difficult time actively communicating with people in person. And this can easily eliminate that concern.
And social anxiety? Let's not sugarcoat it. That's one of the biggest killers of opportunity out there. You watch a kid give a presentation in school, shaking, red faced, convinced every eye is a gun. 5 minutes with hypnosis. We don't erase nerves, we teach them nerves are just energy, mislabeled. Boom. Next presentation, they still feel the surge, but now it's adrenaline, not poison. And studies, like that one from King's College, showed 79% drop in social phobia symptoms after 6 sessions. Not fake, not forever, but enough to let them walk into a room without rehearsing every possible failure. Same for public speaking. We don't turn you into a performer, we remove the shame loop, the one where your brain goes, they'll laugh, they'll see I'm stupid. Snap that, and you're free. And dieting? Forget willpower. We relabel hunger. Craving turns into curiosity. Huh, I wonder if I'm actually thirsty. Or I want flavor, not calories. Exercise? It's not about forcing reps. It's turning movement into meditation. You don't dread the gym. You miss it when you're not there. Because your brain starts whispering, remember how good your lungs feel? And that's no myth. Look up the UCLA trial. Hypnosis group lost twice as much weight as cognitive therapy, kept it off at 2-year follow up. Not magic, just brains doing what they do best, following directions that finally make sense.
And if we get into one of my areas of specialty was pain management. I often would get people that had chronic pain or were on pain medications for years and they just kept taking more and more until now they were getting to the point where their doctor said, if I give you any more, you'll no longer be functional. And by that, I mean, you basically zombify them. And yes, that does solve the pain issue, but they can't really communicate at that point, especially on things like morphine. My contention was always, why have them on any of this if their brain can do the same job? They just need the right tools to do it. And it is a fairly simplistic process, just like quitting smoking, dieting, weight loss, exercise. The hypnosis itself is very much the same. You certainly want to get them to a deep level. You want to reinforce it with them because they need to understand that the pain is not there now, and hard as they try, they can't feel it. But they also need to understand that when I'm not here talking to them, or when the hypnotist is not there speaking with them, that same mechanism of the brain says the pain is not there then as well. And sometimes that takes a little bit of effort because they have their own doubts. And again, if they don't take the suggestions that you want them to take, that doubt can be one that causes them to say, well, it's working now, but it's not going to work later when I'm home alone and, I start feeling an achy back or my arm starts to hurt or my leg starts to twitch. Well, yes, you need to suggest it several times. You need to give them possible follow up if they find things that trigger them. But the reality is, if your mind wants to be out of pain, it will be out of pain. Now, I'm very careful with suggestions for chronic pain. I will give them the suggestion that any pain that your doctor is already aware of and you are in treatment for, or there is no treatment for, you can turn off. They don't need to come back. But any new experience will come and you will feel that experience. It won't be horrible, but you'll feel it. And then depending on who they are, I might even give them a dial to turn it down, but that dial resets every 24 hours because I want them to understand that this is a new pain and that's a signal from your body saying, hey, check this out. And if you just gave them a off switch, some people would never go to a doctor to say, yeah, I got a new pain. So I like to keep it a little bit safe that way.
And that last bit, the reset dial, pure genius. Because pain isn't always bad. Sometimes it's the fire alarm. You're not erasing the alarm, you're just lowering the volume until you decide whether to call the fire department or not. And think about the ripple: one less opioid prescription, one less family watching mom slur through dinner. I once saw a guy, veteran, nerve damage in his foot, came in popping 50 Vicodin a month. 3 sessions, he's down to zero. Not because he's tough, but because his brain finally got the memo. That tingle, not fire, just static. And the beauty is, he still feels when he steps on attack. Dial jumps to 5, he hops, he checks. No brain tumor, no ignored appendix. You're not reckless, you're smarter than the drug. And someday, hospitals will catch up and they'll bill for your voice instead of a drip bag. Until then, we keep whispering.
Yes. And a lot of people ask, okay, well, how does it work? It doesn't make any sense. There's pain. It didn't just go away because you told me it goes away. True.
Fair question.
That is a fair question, and I would agree with them. It didn't go away. And I usually use the example of, imagine I took you and dropped you into a country with people who speak a foreign language you do not understand. And people start speaking to you. I did not make you deaf. You can hear every word they're saying, but you have no idea what they're saying. That's very similar to what we're doing with hypnosis. I didn't make the pain go away, but the signal hits your brain, and your brain no longer deciphers it and attributes pain to it. It kind of doesn't understand what it is, and now we've told it this is either a numbing sensation, a no sensation, a tingling, whatever sensation was most appropriate for the person. Some people don't want to be completely pain-free. They want to know they still have this, so they'll pick a light tingle or a slight numbness. Okay, if that's what they want, whatever works for them, works for them. But what we've done is we've changed the translation. So, yes, the pain is still there. Nothing has changed. It wasn't a cure. It just changed the way your brain interprets the signal coming from that part of your body. And you now can have control over whether you feel it negatively or not at all.
Exactly. The pain didn't vanish. Your dictionary did. Your brain still gets the letter from your foot. Something's happening here. But instead of translating help, it says, pressure, or warmth, or nothing to see. Same neurons, different subtitles. And the genius part, you can switch them back if you want. Want to feel the whole thing? Turn the dial. No surgeon needed. Because you're not blocking the signal, you're just giving it better subtitles.
Now, some of the other things I've been using it for recently: people with Parkinson's, people with MS. There's a range of symptoms for both of those diseases, and so the sessions are deeper and longer in terms of it's not just, yeah, well, you won't feel pain, or, oh, you'll be more balanced and stable. There's a range of things, so you need a little bit of knowledge of what the symptoms of each of those diseases are, and you need to talk with the person as to what they're experiencing and work with them to basically target each one of the symptoms they have and give them some type of either control levers or dials. I'm a fan of using the old-fashioned, dial, like a radio dial, because even people that grew up on cell phone screens know exactly what that is. And you can turn down whatever it is. So if it's pain, you can turn it down. If it's dizziness, you can turn it down. If it's blurry vision, you can turn it up or down. And it allows them to feel in control. And some people prefer to have a little twinge of it to know everything is okay. And then maybe at other times they will completely turn it off because they have important things to do and they don't want to even be bothered by it. And either way, that's fine by me. Whatever works for people, and that's really what it comes down to. It's your mind, and whatever your mind is going to be accepting of is what's going to be working for you. I can't force you to be out of pain if you want to be in pain.
And here's the secret nobody says out loud. Some people want to keep a little pain, because after 10 years of burning legs, numbness is scarier than hurt. The dial lets them steer. You're not erasing their map, you're handing them the wheel. And Parkinson's? Tremor at 7 in the morning, dial to 2, grab the coffee. MS flare up midday. Blur goes from 10 to 3, read the damn book. No drugs, no side effects, no is this real second guessing. Just, I did that. Same brain that gave them the disease now gives them the remote. And if that's not a superpower, what is?
And one other thing I tell people that are coming in, especially for pain management, is if this works, and it will, because you're choosing to allow it to work, there will come a day, perhaps, where it stops working. I am going to tell you in advance, it did not stop working. You have now discovered something that it changed in your life that you value higher than your own pain. And oftentimes, what I've found is when you start asking people, especially chronic pain, older people, end of life care people, you'll find that when they were in pain, their family would come to visit them all the time. Sympathy visits, basically. When the family would call and say, "How are you feeling?" and they'd say, "I feel okay," the family had the kids to bring to soccer and other things, so they stopped coming as frequently. And their mind, not intentionally, but their mind said, well, if I am in pain, they show up, and if I'm not in pain, they kind of don't. And so they brought the pain upon themselves, but nothing changed in them. The ability to turn it off is still the same. Now, they have to make a choice. They can stay in pain just so they can see their family. They can stay out of pain and risk not seeing their family as often. Or my view is you can stay out of pain, tell your family, oh, it's not so good today, and let them come and think you're in pain. I don't see why you should be in pain regardless. But again, it's their choice. But I've often got that call. It's been working for 6 months and now it's stopped. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. It was working for yesterday. It should be working today. So something has changed in you, and we can fix it, or you can choose not to. But they need to understand that. So I will often tell people, when this first happens, this day may occur. And if it does, understand there's some reason. I don't need you to know what it is, but I can guarantee it's not because hypnosis stopped. It's because something is overriding it. Your subconscious mind is saying, this is more important to me at this moment. Okay, that can be dealt with as well if they choose to.
And that's the most honest thing anyone ever tells a patient. Ever. No fairy tale, just heads up. Someday your brain will trade relief for something else. Maybe attention, maybe control, maybe habit. But the switch isn't broken. You're just flipping it on purpose. And the fact that you're willing to say it out loud, that alone keeps them coming back. Because most therapists act like the mind's a one-way street. You proved it's two-way. You can heal yourself, you can also unheal yourself. And the real miracle isn't that hypnosis turns pain off. It's that it hands the switch back and says, now decide what you want. Not what you're used to, not what gets you pity calls, what you actually want. And for some people, that's terrifying because they finally have to ask, am I in pain or am I just waiting to be noticed? And when they pick love over ache, when they lie and say, I'm fine, come anyway, that's not relapse, that's graduation.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're getting people to understand that hypnosis is real. Hypnosis is not some mystical thing. Hypnosis actually works, and hypnosis has a tremendous amount of uses. And when I say it can make anything better, I truly mean it can make anything better. If your brain has experienced a feeling or sensation in the past, you can not only re-experience that, but you can magnify it multiple times in your brain. So whatever good feelings you've had, you can magnify. Now, I'll also admit that if you choose, you can magnify negative feelings. And I find people do that naturally fairly often, leading to depression and other things where they will magnify subconsciously the negative aspects or negative things that have occurred. Um, but
Exactly.
we know that we can fix that.
We do. And it's the same mechanism. Just flip the dial from doom loop to highlight reel. People replay the worst breakup like it's on Netflix repeat. Why not teach them to replay the first time someone said, I love you, but louder, clearer, warmer? We've all got the file. You just need permission to open it. And yeah, depression? Half the battle is the brain treating every setback like a life sentence. Hypnosis? It's the eraser. Not gone, just relabeled. Not tragic, just Tuesday. And tomorrow? Maybe great if you let it be.
All right, so let's talk a few minutes about neurolinguistic programming. Why don't you give me a quick breakdown of the history of it, who created it, how it came about?
Neurolinguistic programming started in the early 1970s, 1972 exactly, at UC Santa Cruz. Two guys, Richard Bandler, a math student with a thing for therapy tapes, and John Grinder, a linguistics professor. They basically broke into the therapy world like burglars, copied three rock stars: Fritz Perls from Gestalt, raw, confrontational stuff; Virginia Satir, family therapist who turned fights into hugs; and Milton Erickson, the hypnosis wizard who talked people out of pain without them noticing. They didn't just read their books. They listened to hours of recordings, mapped the language patterns, the pauses, the voice drops, the reframes, and boiled it down. If the words line up right with how someone's brain pictures the world, change happens fast. Like, instead of I can't lose weight, they teach you to say, I'm choosing what goes on my plate. Same fact, new circuitry. It sounded woo at first. People called it cult science. But then athletes started winning. Sales guys closed bigger deals. Even FBI interrogators used it for rapport. It got messy. Bandler sued Grinder. Trademarks flew everywhere. But the core trick? Model excellence, steal the script, and honestly, it works. Not everything, but enough that I still use the pacing and leading bit on you sometimes, just to get your rhythm right before I say anything real.
Yes, you do.
See?
And it does work. And it works even if you know it's being done. So that's part of the positive, and it's a vast part of the negative, in my opinion, because, and we'll get into those aspects, but even when you know what's being done to you, it still has an effect. To me, that makes it an effective tool. And as any tool, it can be used for good or bad, right? So I choose to use these things to benefit people, and I like things that work. I went back in, I think, 99 or 98 to a Bandler trainer's training on neurolinguistic programming. That's how long ago I was into neurolinguistics. And even back then, it was just following my search around the globe for the science behind hypnosis. So I immediately started asking, why don't you use deeper states of hypnosis with these techniques? And the answers were always very similar. Oh, it's not really needed. No, true, it's not needed. It just works better. And results are just faster. And, compliance is just easier with people because you're asking them to do little mind games, oftentimes. And people find it odd. It's difficult to really explain in a way that sounds scientifically sound to people. Like they're used to big words they don't understand from a guy in a lab coat, and that sounds official. And you're telling them, I want you to make a cartoon in your head, or I want you to imagine you're floating, in a movie theater watching yourself on a screen, and now you're floating up into the booth looking down. And these are all techniques that actually work very effectively, but it's hard to explain to somebody what you're doing in advance in a way that they say, oh, so me making little cartoons in my head is going to change the way I perceive food. It's going to change the way I look at stressful situations. It's going to change the way I feel about tragic events in my life. Yes. Yes, it is. And I use this example often to explain the basic gist of NLP. And this is extraordinarily overly simplified, but it's something that is almost universal amongst people. I ask people, do you ever have a song that when you hear it, many years later or a few weeks later, brings back an emotion? Usually it was a song maybe you broke up to when you have a sad emotion, or sometimes it was your prom song, or something that you heard on your best summer camp vacation every day on repeat because the radio stations do that. But do you ever know a song that when you hear it, just instantly you feel something? I've never met a person who hasn't had that experience. Okay, what that is a neural pathway that has been ingrained. Basically, you had a emotional experience while this song was playing or playing multiple times, and it locked into this song like an anchor. This song is now a trigger. This trigger fires a neural pathway that brings you right back to the emotion you attached to it at that time, and you've been reinforcing it for however long it's been that since this occurred. So you have song triggers a neural pathway triggers emotion causes you to feel a certain way. Well, that is exactly what we're going to do with neurolinguistic programming. Only we're going to create a new trigger or use that trigger and redirect it. So let's say song causes feeling sad. Feeling sad brings, you to a depressed state. Instead of that, we're going to change that by interrupting that pathway, kind of like giving it a new direction and reinforce it. The only way to do that is to create memories of something new in your head. Oftentimes, it needs to be something that's going to stand out. So it can't be something very simple. It has to be something elaborate and creative. And the more ingrained this is, the more elaborate the imagination has to be, which is why cartoons work great because you can imagine all sorts of things that give you a happy feeling, a laughing feeling you just think is stupid, you think is funny, whatever. I need you to create something in your mind that makes you now have almost a chuckle or a giggle.
Okay.
And we're going to link that. So now when you hear the song, it first hits this new giggle memory. And basically that nullifies the bad feeling. And we can create that for any past feeling, and we can create that for new feelings. So we can create triggers in the future that will cause certain positive or negative feelings in people.
And here's the coolest part. Once they see it work on a stupid song, the whole thing clicks. Like, oh, my brain's been doing this to me forever. Now it's just doing it for me. And yeah, cartoons, perfect, because nothing in real life ever gets that absurd. So your subconscious says, huh, new territory, let's overwrite. You don't need a lab coat, you need a giggle. And next episode, we flip it. We show how ads already gave you triggers you didn't ask for, how a jingle makes you crave sugar, how a politician's cadence makes hope feel like a promise instead of a word, and how, knowing the trick, you can cut the puppet strings. But tonight we build the strings, just better ones.
Yes. Now, some of the things I find very useful to know about the brain, neurolinguistics laid out beautifully. And we represent things spatially, whether you're a visual or an auditory or a kinesthetic person. If I ask you to close your eyes and imagine your favorite food, you will tell me what it is. They'll tell me, and I'll go, I'd like you to point to it.
And they're
And
all,
most people are a little bit confused, but you're seeing it somewhere. Even kinesthetic people, and kinesthetic for those who are unaware means their way of thinking is more in feelings. Auditory is their way of thinking is they talk to themselves in their head or they hear voices talking to them. And visual people see pictures. And everybody is a little bit of all, but people tend to dominate one or the other. But even kinesthetic people, in order to know what that food is, has to see it somehow. And then they can point to it in physical space. It's either in front of them, to the right, to the left, above them. It could be next to them. It could be right in front of their face. Could be behind them. Doesn't matter where it is. What I want to know is, where do you keep your favorite food? And then I want to know, where do you keep the food you hate the most? It's never going to be near that. But now I have a basic spatial representation of where you put things in your brain. And your brain will always know things that are where the bad food is, I don't like. Things that are where the good food is, I like. And there's a range in between.
and here's
This is extremely important. I'm sorry, I keep cutting you off because I'm just a linguistical talker. Go ahead.
once I know your good shelf and bad shelf, I can slide anything there, and it sticks. You're trying to stick to veggies? I don't say, eat broccoli. I say, imagine that green crunch right next to your favorite ice cream. Same row, same warmth. Your brain goes, oh, family. And suddenly, salad's not the enemy, it's dessert's neighbor. Same with fear. Put public speaking on the bad shelf, it stays heavy. Slide it 1 inch toward neutral, pair it with coffee chats. Suddenly, it's just another Tuesday. Your brain's a filing cabinet. NLP doesn't rewrite files, it just rearranges the drawers. And once you feel it shift, you can't unfeel it.
Absolutely. And an example I give is something that actually happened to a friend of mine. We were driving, and apparently I was unaware, but he was drinking 2 to 4 liters of Coke a day and wanted to stop. I
So
asked him, are you sure?
he said yes, he was sick of it. So I asked him to picture a glass of Coke right now. Point to where it is. He pointed dead ahead, right in front of his face, big, bright, close, like it was glowing. Then I asked, where's something you absolutely hate the taste of? He pointed way off to the left, down low, kind of gray. I just said, great. Now take that exact glass of Coke and slide it over there, same speed you move your hand, until it lands right next to the nasty stuff. He did it, laughed a little because it felt silly, and that was it. 20 minutes later, we stop at a gas station. He walks straight past the cooler, grabs a water, and goes, huh, didn't even want one. Hasn't touched Coke in 8 years. one slide, no lecture, no willpower, just geography. That's the power when you speak the brain's native language.
It's remarkable how quickly the brain can respond when you utilize its own system. And we haven't been taught to utilize it. I think I mentioned last time, I feel remorseful that this isn't taught to children in school as a basic of how to use your brain. We teach them math, we teach them social studies, we teach them all sorts of things. We don't teach them how to use their brain to make their life better mentally. And this could easily do it.
And imagine no tests, no grades, just where do you put worry? Where do you put pride? Slide the first one back, pull the second forward, boom, better day. We teach fractions before we teach feelings. And look what we get adults who can solve for X but panic at a text. If every kid learned two things, my brain has shelves, my mind has dials, we'd raise a generation that doesn't medicate moods, they redecorate them. Not in college, not in therapy, in second grade, during recess, with crayons. And if that sounds nuts, good, because nuts is how change starts.
Yes. And I think more people should understand neurolinguistic programming has limitations for sure. Like I said, there's been a lot added to it over the years that are what I would call not foundational. They're just, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this and we'll try this? Yeah, that's fine. It's every therapy has its fringe type of treatments, and some of them work with some people and some don't. But because of the volume of fringe, it's gotten a less than receptive welcome.
And that's
And yet, anyone who's ever had it done to them or learned to use it for themselves has had tremendous success with very basic knowledge, let alone a professional that knew how to do the things that needed to be done to effectively cause lasting change.
the fringe is gold, the core, like that Coke trick. Anyone can do it. You don't need a weekend seminar. You just need to ask, where do I keep the thing I hate? And suddenly you're not helpless. You're the librarian. And yeah, the noise keeps doctors from prescribing it. But that's why we're here. Because once people taste real control, quiet, simple, no pills, they stop caring about the noise. And the real tragedy? They're not teaching it. So we will, starting now.
Yes. I'm sure we're going to have more discussions on this topic. We'll probably dive into some of the different techniques, some of the more advanced techniques. I was referring to one earlier with the movie theater. It's basically a fix for phobias, and it can be used for many different things, but it's basically a disassociation technique. So it disassociates you from the fear you had. Those are a little bit more elaborate than just moving, one item in your head. But it's also key to understand that you don't just move the Coke. If you don't want to eat Snickers bars, you find where you put them and you move them over there with the Coke and the stuff you don't like. And you stop looking for them because your brain says, yeah, I don't like things over there, so I don't even think about them anymore because I know I don't like what's in that side of my head or behind me or wherever you keep it. And this is something that differs for everyone, so there is no right or wrong, which is why I ask people, point to it, because I don't know where you put things. I know where I put my things that I like or dislike, but you can have very different locations for it, and that's fine. And you can also have them differing in size, or things you don't like might be black and white, whereas things you do like are bright and colorful. The brain is infinitely variable in what it can come up with on its own. And so a good practitioner will have to get that information from the person because I don't know. But I do know how to ask you what I need to know in order to create the lasting change in your mind. And I do know that if you want to change, you can. I also know that if you want to put the Coke back where it used to be, you now know I can just move that Coke back up there where I liked it. Sure. It's your brain. It's your life. If you want to drink more Coke, put it back there.
And that's why I don't sell you anything. I don't even suggest. I just hand you the map, you mark the X. If you want the Coke front and center tomorrow, boom, it's back. If you want broccoli next to joy, it's there. No guru, no contract. Just here's where things go, move at will. Because you're not broken, you're just disorganized. And anyone who's ever alphabetized their spice rack knows once you know the system, everything else is muscle memory. Go nuts. Or don't. Up to you.
This is a good place to end, and it's a shame because there is so much that can be discussed with hypnosis. Because when I say anything that you can imagine can be improved in your life, that's fully accurate because your brain can improve anything you can imagine. So there is really no end to the possibilities of what you can do with your mind. But
And honestly, thing I want people to take away tonight. You're already doing this. Your brain's running the show. Hypnosis, NLP, just tools to remind you. And when you realize that, nothing's impossible because you're the one in control. Always were. Thanks for listening. See you next time, where we'll talk about how everyone else wants to steal that control. Good night.
good night.
Good night. Conversations with Ara.
Deep dives with Grok. Let's explore everything together.
Curious Minds only. Find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts.